Real quick before I begin this video, I'd like to mention I started a new shoutout tier on Patreon where I'll give your name, brand, band, or website a verbal shoutout at the end of these videos. Perfectionism is something I've noticed a lot of artists and creatives talk about experiencing. As someone who's struggled a lot with perfectionist tendencies, I want to share some tips for how to manage them and even use perfectionism in a positive way. There's actually two sides to this coin: adaptive perfectionism and maladaptive perfectionism. Perfectionism can be good if it inspires you to hold yourself to a higher standard and seek continual improvement. This is adaptive perfectionism, a form of perfectionism that doesn't cause undue anxiety, but rather inspires you to be your best self. Adaptive perfectionists set high yet reachable goals and are intensely focused on achieving those goals. With adaptive perfectionism, a person doesn't feel ashamed when they fail. They're able to accept the results and learn from mistakes, being inspired and excited to try again. Adaptive perfectionists don't take failure personally and are able to manage expectations and understand their own limitations. This understanding of one's own abilities helps to set goals that can be achieved in the first place, creating a positive feedback loop between effort and outcome. With maladaptive perfectionism, a person sets unrealistically high goals, attaches their self-worth to succeeding, and experiences a great deal of shame and self-hatred when they don't reach those goals. This creates a feedback loop of self-doubt and procrastination, which discourages deliberate practice, as making mistakes and errors are necessary for growth. Maladaptive perfectionism comes from attaching your identity to your work. It comes from insecurity. It comes from being a lot harder on yourself than you would be on anyone else's work. Here's what maladaptive perfectionism does to one's work. Obsessive loop of constant tweaking. Tasks feel impossible. Focus on avoiding mistakes makes learning new skills slow. Impossibly high standards leads to self-doubt and procrastination. It's a tricky balance. If you don't care enough about what you do, then that's a problem. We've all seen work from people who put in the absolute bare minimum of effort. But if you care too much about what you're making, if you attach your entire self-worth to your work, it can be paralyzing. Making art is a highly personal process, so of course some of our identity is naturally attached to the outcome. But just remember that emotions are temporary. You might win an award for your work or make a client very pleased, or you might make a painting that never sells and collects dust in the closet. Both of these outcomes, positive or negative, offer only a very temporary emotional response. Think about the last time you won an award, or the last time your post on social media got 10 times more likes than normal. It feels good for maybe a few days, maybe one day, or maybe just an hour. Then you return to your baseline level of happiness. It's kind of absurd how hard we humans chase after this cocktail of pleasure-inducing neurotransmitters when you realize that pleasure fades away just as quickly as it appears. Likewise, discomfort can have just as short of a half-life, yet discomfort tends to last far longer than happiness due to our brain's obsession with survival and pain avoidance. The fight or flight response of the amygdala is often too overreactive, while our frontal lobes, which are necessary for emotional regulation, are often too sluggish. But just like any muscle in the body, we can train our brains to have more adaptive and healthy responses to fear and stress. In school, we take tests to measure our success or failure. We get precise percentage points, a precise grade to show just how well or poorly we did on the assignment. Yet, this is an artificial environment, as the real world is far more nuanced and complicated. And in the context of creative work, success is far harder to define in concrete terms. It's not really helpful to obsess over ideas of success or failure when doing deeply creative work. In school, you're punished for wrong answers. Making art and doing anything creative requires constant exposure to ambiguity and a willingness to experiment and learn from the wrong answers. When it comes to art, sometimes the so-called mistakes turn into an entire new style or movement. You really have to unlearn the mindset conventional education has programmed us with if you want to walk the artist's path. Emotions poof in and out of existence. This fear of failure is also a fear of not achieving happiness or comfort or whatever other fleeting emotion we chase after. But remember, nothing lasts. Anxiety, fear, happiness, sadness, the full spectrum of emotions that we have words for and emotions we have no language to describe, these all come and go. Nothing's perfect, nothing lasts, and nothing is ever truly finished. If perfect doesn't exist, then the very pursuit of perfect is itself delusional. We're chasing after a mirage. So, what's the solution? Well, I'm just a voice on YouTube saying stuff. I don't really know the solutions to anything, but I do know what's worked for me, and I hope it can help you too. In my opinion, the solution to perfectionism is the creative process itself, the process of stepping out of your own way and making things. Perfectionism comes from the desire for the end result to be perfect. The problem is the focus on the end result. Ironically, this focus on the end result is what crushes the creative spirit and makes starting in the first place the most difficult step. So, if focusing over the finished result is the problem, then focusing on the creative process itself must be the solution. The work will show you the way. Routines will keep you grounded. Showing up to your work area on a consistent basis will keep you creative, regardless of how inspired you may feel at any moment. Inspiration is fleeting, but building a creative habit to work a set number of hours each day is stable and reliable. The process will produce the results. Don't think about the results. Think about the process and getting in the flow state. How you get in that flow state varies from person to person. For me, I do a 15-minute yoga each morning. I do some reading while I eat breakfast to turn my brain on, and then I get started animating. I do the hardest tasks early in my workday while I'm the most alert. I do the more repetitive and mindless tasks during the second half of my workday. I take a 45-minute walk in the middle of the day to get fresh air and clear my head, and then I'm energized to work the rest of the day. If you want to see a vid about my full routine, you can click the card. These simple little routines keep me grounded. Also, writing down the most important tasks you have to do for the day will keep you on track. Make lists of goals you need to accomplish for the next day before you go to bed. That way you don't waste time wondering what to work on when you get up. A really useful tip comes from the writer Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway would end his writing session by taking a small step in the next day's work. He'd start a paragraph and leave a sentence unfinished. All he had to do the next day to make progress was finish that sentence. By leaving something unfinished, it lets you make a small win early in the day. For animation, I'll often leave a frame half drawn. That way I know exactly where to start on the next day. Getting back to work on your project is often the hardest part of the day, so make it easy for yourself by leaving something undone that's easy to finish up when you return. It keeps the momentum going from day to day, so you're never stuck. The first stage of any project is always going to be rough and messy. When you begin a project, you have to turn the editor in your head off. What you see on social media is a curated version of people's work. We don't see all the hours and mistakes and revisions that led to the finished project. So be okay with making plenty of mistakes and having a messy quality at the start of any project. Feedback and constructive criticism can come later, but at the initial stage, the most important thing is to get something out there. Any step in the right direction is better than none. Thoughts are fickle, and we're painfully forgetful creatures. Even scribbling a quick thumbnail sketch that only you can understand is better than keeping it in the fog of your head. Even though we can logically understand that maladaptive perfectionism doesn't help us, that doesn't mean we can just turn it off. Much like anxiety, these negative thought loops don't have a clear off button. So instead of pushing back or feeling defeated, just accept it. I accept that I'm experiencing perfectionism, but I'm not going to identify with it. Instead of saying I'm anxious, try saying I'm experiencing anxiety. It's only a mental vapor like any other, and it comes and goes. It's strange how when you don't try to forcefully push away negative emotions, they tend to dissipate more quickly. Do some slow, deep breaths. and let your thoughts come and go without judging them. Perfectionism breeds procrastination. Deadlines create a structure that force you to not obsess over any one detail for too long. When you have a deadline, it changes your perspective. You start to focus on what's essential and ignore what's non-essential. There is such a thing as overworking a project. Of course, you need ample time to do your best work. Being rushed and in a state of panic isn't conducive to a healthy working environment. Underestimating how long something will take is common for artists. A general rule of thumb is to give yourself 50% more time than you think you'll need. If you estimate a project will take 4 weeks for a client, book in 6 weeks on your calendar. If you find yourself relating more to the maladaptive traits of perfectionism, don't worry. In reality, most people have traits of both sides of the spectrum. Just like with any spectrum, we aren't fully one way or the other, but a various mix of traits. It isn't black or white, and you can take steps to improve yourself. The first step is to be kind to yourself and allow yourself a space to practice your craft in a non-judgmental way, where the process is what matters and there's no pressure to avoid errors. If this means scribbling, then go for it. Don't focus on avoiding errors, focus on doing great work. Shift your focus from avoiding the negative and focus on achieving the positive. Here's a quick recap of some tips for dealing with perfectionism. Have a work routine and stick with it. Write down your most important tasks for the next day. When you know what to work on every day, you won't waste time with indecision. Set a deadline. Deadlines replace your fear of making bad work with a fear of making no work. It's far better to produce some art than it is to produce nothing. Not producing art won't make you any better. Practice makes better, not perfect. Be inspired by others' art, but don't compare your own progress with others. You're running your own race on your own path. No one else is on the same path as you are. Quantity leads to quality. The more projects you can see to completion, the more experience points you'll gain. Just like a little Pokemon, you have to fight a lot of battles to level up. Don't take on a level 100 project if you're only at level 10. Seek to take on projects that are around your level or slightly higher to gain consistent experience points. You should always do your best work, but remember that the majority of people aren't going to notice the tiniest details you may be agonizing over. Focus on the big picture first, and if you have time left, tweaking the smallest details can be a bonus, but shouldn't be the primary focus. Work on emotional regulation and self-compassion. Practice techniques for calming anxiety, like deep breathing, unplugging from social media for several hours or even an entire day, eating a healthy diet, connecting with friends, and walking outside. Getting professional help is no sign of weakness, but rather a sign of intrapersonal intelligence. So this is something to consider if other practices aren't working. The less anxious you can be while you work, the more present you'll be with the process. It might seem like a paradox, but the less you care about being perfect, the more likely you are to actually achieve your highest standards. Let go and go with the flow. Special Patreon shoutout goes to these lovely people: King Leo Picasso, Nick Marsden of Pleasure Fields. Check out his work on Pleasure Wax Records on Bandcamp. And thank you to ELLIOT CRASKE. If you'd like a shoutout for your name or site, you can join the shoutout tier on Patreon, which includes a verbal shoutout at the end of my videos, as well as all previous Patreon rewards. Patreon rewards you'll get include 9 new animated loops on the first day of every month. You can use these animation clips in your own videos, and you'll also get behind-the-scenes assets like storyboard PDFs from my films. Like the video if you liked it, and be sure to watch all the other art business vids from the playlist on the screen. Topics include creativity, freelancing, making and selling digital products, starting your own Patreon, artist block, and I'm going to be actively uploading more vids like this one with speed drawings while I talk about various art and business related topics. This has been a video by Mikey Buzan Animation. Thanks for watching.